Imagine growing up around civil engineering. Your father was an immigrant, he came to the United States and he built a company and you saw it being built. And then over time, you became a civil engineer and you worked with your father, and then one day you lost your father and you had to take over the company, of course, while dealing with the grief of losing a parent. Well, in today's episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, I have with me Marc Sandhu, president of ARS Engineers. And that was his story. And so in this episode, Marc talks to us a lot about his father, the legacy he left, but we also get into everything going on right now in the world of civil engineering. And he gives some great advice for taking on leadership roles in companies, whether you were ready to do it or not. And he really took some time to talk about these things in detail, which we really appreciated. Now, before we jump in with Marc, I do want to take a minute to recognize our sponsor. Our sponsor for this episode is Colliers Engineering and Design. Colliers Engineering and Design is a multidiscipline engineering firm with over 1,800 employees in 63 offices nationwide and growing fast. Colliers Engineering and Design maintains an internal culture that is nurtured through the promotion of integrity, collaboration, and socialization. Their employees enjoy hybrid work environments, continuous career advancement, health and wellness offerings, and programs and projects that have a positive impact on society. Colliers Engineering and Design stays on the cutting edge of technology, and their entrepreneurial approach to expansion provides personal and professional development opportunities across the firm. Leadership's dedication to the well-being of their employees and their families is demonstrated throughout the wide range of benefits and programs available to them. For more information, visit the career page on their website at colliersengineering.com. Now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the podcast today, Marc Sandhu, president of ARS Engineers. Marc, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate the opportunity. Really excited.
I'm definitely excited to talk to you, Marc. So let's get going here. Let's start off just in your own words. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in your current position.
Sure. So I've been kind of in the industry for a long time. Some might say even as a baby, because my dad was the owner of this company. He was the founder of the company 37 years ago. He started it, and I'm an only child. And so as a kid, I have so many memories of going to ASCE and TSPE and TSPS and ACEC and many other conferences when he was doing kind of his stint as president of the Dallas branch of all those different chapters and societies. So I've been around the civil engineering industry for a long time, and did internships here all through high school and winter break and things like that. Nothing fancy. I was taking out the trash and answering the phone and helping people write proposals and things like that. I wasn't doing any design work, but through that experience, I really learned a lot about soft skills, about how projects are run, just hearing other people talk about it, project managers and stuff, about how surveying is done, a lot of different things. So I went to Texas A&M University, graduated in December of 2008. And that was right in the middle of a gigantic market crash. So I honestly didn't have the intention to start right back at ARS or start my full-time career here at ARS after I graduated. But just because most people weren't hiring, I had a few other offers outside of Dallas, but it just made the most sense to come back here, start my full-time career here, pay off a lot of debt, and kind of go from there. So I started off as a graduate engineer and did nothing but roadway design for many years as an EIT, and then became a PE. And throughout that time, really that first few years, and even before that, I started to realize that I'm a competent engineer. Technical expertise is extremely important. I need to hone those skills, but I started honing proposal and business development skills. I found that's where my niche was, where I could really excel. And so keeping the technical skills up, but then starting to think about clients and what markets we're focused on and which municipalities we should work with and how to write a successful proposal. That was all kind of happening at the same time. So I became a project manager, and then vice president and director of engineering and business development. Those are out of order, but just served in different roles. And then when my dad had pneumonia in 2019 and was completely taken out of work here for many months, that's when I kind of became acting president. It was out of necessity, really, and unfortunately, he just passed away on December 31st of 2021. So it's very fresh. But I was given the keys to the company, passed the torch officially in July of last year. So timing is really. I'm blessed with the timing of how all that happened and how everything was already officially given over to me. But we just lost him, and just trying to figure out how to move on without him. But he left an amazing legacy and left all the keys to be able to do that. So
that's great, Marc. Thanks for that breakdown. And I'm certainly sorry to hear about your father, but it sounds like he was an amazing man. And we're going to talk a lot about him today as we get into this episode further, for sure. And, just kind of reflecting on what you said, I think that it must have been great to have your father, leading by example for you really your whole life in terms of, what you want to do, where you want to go with your career. A lot of people kind of don't have that guidance. So that's great. And, when you're around the industry of civil engineering so much with your father, you kind of can see all the different components of civil engineering, because as you know, civil engineering can be very broad ranging. There's a lot of different ways that you can go, even in just the world of civil engineering. And I think that kind of being able to see a company run from the inside can give you insights to really all of the opportunities that are available in the world of civil engineering, and really many of them that any high school student may not really understand or have the chance to see, right? I mean, you may know you like math and you like science, and I knew I kind of like them and I like being outdoors, which is why I went into civil engineering. But would you say that you kind of had a lot more insight because of your upbringing?
I think so. Yes, I would say it's accurate, and I'm trying to help kind of curb this problem in different ways, but it's accurate to say that many high school students know that it involves math and science, but don't know about the breadth of different areas within civil engineering and exactly what a civil engineer does, And so through some stuff I'm doing with TSPE, and I know ASCE does a lot too, trying to help with education for the next generation. But for me, yes, because of my extremely unique opportunity to be around the civil engineering companies and be at company parties and intern here, I think I had a better idea of the different branches within the civil engineering tree and which one I wanted to kind of go for. Yes.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit more about the history of your firm and really your father and his story of how he built the firm. Tell us a little bit more about that. I know he went through some tough times, but take us through it, because I do think his whole story is really interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. So I'm first generation born in the greatest state in America of Texas, born in Dallas. My parents were both born in Pakistan. So my dad's story is that he got a math and physics degree in Pakistan, and then got into the construction industry and started doing some design work. And there was a hospital in Lahore in Pakistan that he helped design, and he met a US-based engineer through that project, and that engineer helped sponsor him and bring him over here, and he became a civil engineering student at Southern Methodist University, SMU here. Then he graduated in 1972 with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering, and started at a firm now called RLG. At the time, it was called Raymond L. Goodson Engineers. And within 15 years, he had moved up to associate or partner or whatever the term was. And I would say he took the greatest entrepreneurial risk he could at that time with two business partners, the late Fritz Beck and Andy Martin. And they broke off and started a couple of companies, actually. Beck, Sandhu, and Martin was one of them, and ARS Engineers was another, and they helped fund each other and looked out for each other. And he kind of, with a couple of his friends, took a giant risk, and it worked out very well. it's not every small business that succeeds, and I feel like he really lived out the American dream by taking that risk. So he basically started off the company back in 1984. For a very short stint, it was private development focused, and then it's been government work, municipal work, work for TxDOT, federal work, but government based roadway design, civil engineering, land surveying, and utilities. Those are our three focus areas. So yeah, his story is unique, to say the least, and he left a great example of how to kind of chase the American dream.
Yes, it sounded like he really did chase that dream. How big is ARS, Marc, just so that our listeners know?
We're the giant number of 35 people, so we're definitely in small business territory, and we've been between 30 and 35 people for the last 15 years. There was a time in the 90s when I think it got closer to 50. We had offices in different places, but we've stayed right there around 30 ever since.
That's great, Marc. And I mean, I know personally firsthand how difficult it is to build a small business. Firstly, just from working with a lot of our engineering clients and kind of helping them grow their firms, but also from building the Engineering Management Institute. And listen, for me, English is my first language. I was born here, but that wasn't the case for your father.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had, in addition to all of the risks associated with building a business, he had to overcome those challenges as well. So I think it's safe to say that he was a very special person to be able to overcome all of those challenges and build what he built. So talk about that. What was it that made him be able to overcome all these challenges and do what he did?
Yeah, great question. After his passing, I've had so many people reach out and kind of talk about what that was about him. He would never give up. He would try so hard to get in with the particular clients that he deemed would be good for the company's future, but never in a demanding way. He was the guy who was always smiling in any room he went into. He could talk to a brick wall, just very personable. And I think his determination to focus on something and get in a particular market segment, like way back in the 90s with the city of Dallas, for instance, he was just really kind and really persistent. I think those two things were true about him. So
that's great, Marc. And I'm sure that you wish that your father was kind of here sitting next to you doing this interview with you today.
Sure.
But that's what life is, right?
Yeah.
It throws things at us that, challenges that we have to deal with in adversity. And it certainly seems like you were prepared to deal with this. I'm sure you're obviously internally struggling a bit here, but you've taken over the company, you've exhibited that leadership. And I'm sure that that's largely in part because of him, because of your father and the mentoring that he provided to you.
Yep. And as a teenager, I may have had a different opinion about this whole civil engineering is great. That was thrust upon me, but it was never forcefully. I failed to mention before that when I went to A&M, I started there thinking I like math and science. Let's start off in civil engineering and see if I like it. And then I did. It wasn't because some hand was being forced upon me to have to do that career path. I just ended up really liking it. So
that's great. And I would think that it's safe to say that any civil engineering professional in Texas today is in pretty good shape in terms of, their career prospects going forward, in terms of the amount of work in Texas, and now we've got this infrastructure funding coming. So it's certainly an exciting time. And, your father obviously left a legacy. And again, he sounded like he was an amazing person. So where do you go from here? You have some big shoes to fill, to continue that legacy. So, how are you going to do that?
Yeah. Put very simply, something I'm trying to focus on is just to keep smiling. That's kind of been my thing. Like I said before, he'd be smiling in any room he went into, and even in pretty tough financial times, he seemed to find a way to do that. But in a more specific sense to the business, it's just always taking care of our employees. No matter how much we grow, making the small business feel and the company culture here stick, and making people feel like they're valued inside the company and outside the company. That goes to our clients, that goes to the residents who are driving on these roads or using these utilities. Just making sure that we're thinking about the big picture and taking care of people and not just solely focusing on formulas. Formulas are very important to make sure that the design is sound and that we're taking care of the health, welfare, and safety of the public. But it's just that, it's the public, it's focusing on people.
That's great, Mark. I really give you a lot of credit. I mean, you seem like a very personable, happy person right now on the outside. Again, I'm sure that there's pain that you're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
But you have a lot of responsibility in running the company, right? And making sure that the people that work there can support their families. And, it seems like you're doing a commendable job with that. And I know it's hard. I really know it's hard. But again, it looks like you're doing great work. So please just keep it going.
I appreciate it.
So let's talk a little bit more about the business side of things, Mark. Let's talk about smaller minority business ownership and the role that plays in state and federal civil engineering work. I mean, I know we have listeners all over the country, not just in Texas, but we also have a lot in Texas. So we might talk a little bit about Texas, but also in general. Talk to us about how that works.
Sounds good. Yeah. So here in Texas, and we're now expanding to Colorado as well, but for 37 years, it's been Texas only. In this market, there is the NCT RCA here in North Texas. I believe that's the North Central Texas Regional Certification Authority. Apologies if I got it wrong, but it's something like that, that we went to get our MBE, DBE, and SBE, Minority Business Enterprise, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and Small Business Enterprise certifications. And then separately from that, we have the Texas Hub, Historically Underutilized Business Certification. That's a lot of letters. I had a client one time tell me, I was trying to get into the specifics of what was required for the particular job. And they were like, you guys have some of that alphabet soup, right? You guys are an alphabet soup company. Like, yeah, we have the alphabet soup, or at least some of them. So the differences between them, I will not claim to be an expert on how and when and where each one applies, but I'll say I know that it is based on federal funding or non-federal funding. It's based on the particular municipality's needs and kind of what they follow. And the percentages of a required amount of that type of firm doing work on a government job changes from job to job and from type to type. So I'll say it a little better. Like, I've seen it range from a prime TxDOT project needing 11% DBE up to a 23.7% hub or a 25.66% MBE, or even on an aviation job, I saw it was like a 35 or 40% goal. And it's just that, it's a goal. It's an attempt for the prime to make a good faith effort to give a certain amount of work to small or disadvantaged or minority business or woman-owned business enterprise or veteran-owned business enterprise, depending on the type of work and the client.
And for those of you out there listening that are less experienced, some of these things you might be hearing for the first time. So if you decide to go into business one day for yourself and maybe open up a very small civil engineering firm, there are advantages of having some of these certifications. To Mark's point, larger companies may go out, they may get a big project, and then they're going to have to find subcontractors that fit these requirements for certain percentages of the project. And, there are plenty of companies that spend their lifetime as a company as subcontractors to these larger companies because they have these certifications. So I really think it's great, because if you're starting off and you happen to fall into one of those categories, you can really leverage that to help you grow your business. And then, you can build a business, you can build a legacy, you can help support a lot of people and their families. And so it's exciting. And that's why you need to be aware of some of these certifications and how maybe you can use them. And that's really one of the reasons that we wanted to have Mark come on today and talk about them. And so, Mark, in your example, let's say at ARS, is that typically how it works? Do you typically sub out to a lot of larger companies? Talk to us a little bit about how the process works for you.
Sure. Yeah, there's a definite marketing aspect to it, because I think every small business owner in this industry who's watching this would know and affirm that just because you're one of the alphabet soup letters doesn't mean a ton, because there are a lot of extremely qualified, small, minority, etc. businesses around, and it matters that you do good work. So, like I said, there's a marketing aspect. There's a connecting with primes, the larger firms who are going after certain pursuits. A good thing to do is show up to a pre-proposal meeting, even if you're not going to be able to chase it as prime, but a prime may need to reach out for another firm to be on their team. That's a great way to do it. And developing business relationships with prime firms who will keep going back to you when they need something else. One of our soft goals over the years has been to just become the preferred sub-consultant for different clients from the prime firms that we enjoy working with. And I'll say as far as our market share, that was most of it. It was sub-consultant work for most of our revenue for years and years and years and years. And we made a concerted effort in 2016 timeframe to try to graduate, so to speak, into really pushing to get a TxDOT prime contract. And the first one happened. We did a good job, and the ball kept rolling in a positive direction. And I'm blessed to say we have, I think it's 5 open prime TxDOT indefinite delivery contracts, which is just crazy for a firm our size. And let me just say this, came after a whole lot of losses in a row. Let me be humble and say that. Years and years of lose as prime, but then the cards kind of fall in the right place. So I mentioned that to say, even though we are an MBE, DBE, SBE hub firm, on certain contracts, it doesn't matter. We still have to find another MBE, DBE, SBE hub firm to subcontract to us. It all depends, different rules for different things, whether you can self-perform or not. But we're able to, I would say, kind of give back in a way. And it feels really good to be able to do that. And I've delved way off from your question. But yes, finding primes who are chasing work in areas that you're competent in, it's getting in front of them and letting them know that you can consult to them. Yeah.
And just to follow up on that, from a logistical standpoint, Marc, is it possible for you to be on multiple project teams on one proposal? That is possible, correct?
Yes. With the somewhat rare exception where a prime may ask you to go exclusively with them, which gives benefit to both parties. If you think they're going to win, and if they think that you are a giant benefit to the team, and they'll only get it on this one team. Yeah. A lot of that happens a lot more on the bigger design build pursuits, the in the billions total cost of project stuff, more so than the regular design bid build format stuff. Yeah.
All right, Marc. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of more technical questions around this, and then we'll move on to something else. What is the MBE, DBE, SBE certification, and how does it differ from a Texas hub certification for those listeners in Texas?
I would say I am no expert in the particular differences between them, but I did a little bit of research as to who uses which one and that kind of thing. And I would say that a lot of the state-funded TxDOT work that we chase has a hub requirement. And a lot of the federally funded TxDOT work that we chase has a DBE requirement. And I think it's all based on funding. And as far as getting those certifications, I'm blessed to have come into a company that had all of them for a long time before I came here. But talking to other firms, I know that it takes a lot of paperwork, a lot of financial review, and it can be a long process to get these certifications. And it's based on ownership percentage and then other things, total revenue for the year. You can graduate out of these if you become a very large company. The personal net worth of the owner, that's another item that affects whether or not you can be one or the other. And it's really different per type. Yeah. Perhaps I could, I found a couple of good websites that I could send you that kind of summarize them that might be beneficial to the watchers here.
Yeah, that would be great, Marc. We can put those links in the description here on YouTube. Cool. We could also put them in the show notes for our audio listeners. So, Marc, one more question about this funding and the certifications. What is an 8A certification for federal work? What does that mean to be 8A certified, or what are some of the benefits associated with that? Can you share some information on that?
Sure thing. So that's a program that you enter and graduate out of. I believe it's 9 years later. And that was at a time when we were really attempting to chase more and more federal work, specifically through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so once again, a game of a lot of paperwork and a lot of forms. And then you get into the program, and it gives you the benefit of getting relationships and review from the Corps and teaming opportunities for small business set-asides that the Corps puts out. So I think that would be generally what the benefit is, that when you say you're an 8A firm. And a lot of the primes who are chasing Corps work will ask that question, are you an 8A firm? I need to say something honestly about it. Yeah, so we got into it, did get a few jobs out of it, and then graduated. And I think if we had made a more concerted effort to really hone in on that market, to really get to know the local district better and that kind of stuff, we probably could have had even more success from that program. But we kind of got in it, got some work, and then graduated out of it. There's another similar program in the sense that it's a mentor protege program from the NTTA here local in the Dallas area, the North Texas Tollway Authority. They have a diversity program called the Road Program. And for that one, they assign you a mentor when you're a small firm. So we were mentored by AECOM, and it was wonderful. This was back in 2014. It was a couple years long, and there was kind of a set program where they helped us with business practices and how we handle certain things. And so I feel like we got a lot of benefit out of that one. We could have done better with our time at 8A, if I'm being completely honest.
Okay, so that 8A program, that's a federal, right? So that's across all 50 states?
I believe so. Although I don't think that's a Texas only thing. I believe it is across all states.
We'll put some links and information in the description of the video or in the show notes for our audio listeners so that you can read through it if you're interested in these programs. And the other thing that I'll mention here on the mentoring side of it, Mark just referred to mentoring. That's available in a lot of states. In fact, I recently interviewed a couple of civil engineering business owners up in Alaska, and they went through a similar type of mentoring program through one of the organizations. I think it may have been the DOT. I can't remember which one exactly, but they were paired up with a larger firm, and that larger firm kind of mentored them and helped them along. So if you're a small business owner, you're building a small company, and you're looking to learn about some of these certifications or some of these programs, there are mentoring opportunities out there where you can actually formally receive mentoring from a larger company that's experienced with these items. So definitely look for that and take advantage of that. All right, Mark. So in the world of civil engineering, we know that things can and will go wrong on projects pretty regularly, whether it's because of a poor choice that was made, a mismatch of expectations, poor communications, or other obstacles. And I'm interested in hearing from you in terms of how you deal with challenges. You personally have dealt with problems on your projects, problems with your clients, going through these processes. Talk about how you deal with obstacles.
I definitely have run into problems on projects kind of through the whole gamut. And I think it's important to just be honest with the client. I see that some clients can see straight through the promise of everything will be always perfect, with no mistakes, no QA/QC needed, and we'll turn it in 6 months early. It's not happening, and people try to sell those kind of things quite a lot. And the real truth is you got to have a QA/QC process in-house and a schedule that's adhered to and good management. But sometimes unexpected things go wrong. It has happened to us many times, and I would say I kind of learned the hard way and have learned from it and never made the mistake again. Of what I learned was got to be on top of communication with the client if there's a potential schedule change because of X, Y, or Z, because of a new unexpected government entity roadblock, or because of a staffing change, or no matter what the particular issue is. If you can get out in front of it and be honest about where things are and commit to perhaps the same final deadline, but maybe something else needs to just shift a hair, and commit to adding more resources and stuff like that. It's surprises to a client that really sting the most usually. And I could say that we're a no surprises place now, but many years ago, there was a couple things that happened and we learned from it. And so I just think managing staff expectation and schedules internally, and if there's an unexpected roadblock, getting in front of the client and letting them know and working with them on a resolution on how to make it better for all parties.
I think that's great advice, Mark. And I know from my own experience as a civil engineer that sometimes in those conversations in the moment, the client may be upset with you because something's going to take longer than they want it to. But I think over the long term of the relationship, they appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
And really at the end of the day, that's what they want, right? This is their bottom line. It's the money related to their projects, to their livelihood, right? So they want to know that if something's going to take a certain amount of time, they want to know how long, right? And they want things to be done right. So I think at the end of the day, the good clients really appreciate you being honest with them. And they want to work with an engineering professional who's going to tell them like it is at the end of the day. And again, this is not easy to do, especially when you're younger in your career and you're dealing with the intimidation of a larger client. Again, in the long run, though, you will build the right relationships if you take this approach.
Yep. And building trust with the client for sure. Yep.
All right, Mark. So all this stuff we're talking about, there's so much going on in civil engineering. There's a lot going on in Texas. Now there's this infrastructure money that's coming. How in the world do you get downtime in your career? How do you have any balance in your life when you're running a company in an industry that is so busy and so frenetic right
now? Poorly, but getting better. The work-life balance idea, the downtime. I think that, for years and years, I worked with very little downtime, and no real vacations for a long time. And I would say about a year and a half ago, I came to the realization of how much burnout that was causing for me, and also, of course, affecting my family. I have little kids, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, an amazing wife, and just how it was affecting everything, just kind of level of burnout. And so I think just making sure to take a real vacation as often as you can, even if it's just once a year. Took one last year and it was wonderful. That the week off, I came back so recharged. That's one thing. But of course, that's not everything. Trying to find better boundaries to keep work at work and home at home, and focus on my kids and focus on my family. Like I admitted at the beginning of this answer, working on it. But I could say I had a great example. My dad, now I'm learning how many incredible financial hardships he had to go through, and personally loan money into the company just to keep payroll going and stuff like that. I never knew any of that stuff. He never missed a soccer game, basketball game, baseball game, piano recital. I mean, he was there at home. And I would say that's what I'm trying to do better at. Keep work at work, do a good job at work. Of course, as a business owner, you can never really turn it off. I get that. And I would encourage any potential small business owner, someone who's thinking of starting a company, you got to learn that. But also, you just hire staff who can handle things in your absence and only really get you if there's an emergency, and silo that time and spend time with your family accordingly. Yeah.
That's great, Mark. And it's really impressive to hear that your father, he did all of that. He went through those hardships without you knowing about it. And he was always available in your life. That really is great. And obviously, again, he set a great example for you. And it sounds like really in everything he did, that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to set that example. So before we wrap up this segment, there's one last thing that I want to ask you about, which is kind of some final advice for listeners who might be considering starting their own civil engineering company. I know we've talked a lot about some of this stuff already, but is there any last things that come to mind that you could offer?
Say a couple things. First of all, don't give up, because I've seen, hearing about my dad's experience and also seeing other people start their own firm, there's a lot you got to put in on the front end and a lot of risk. And I've seen things go well, and I've seen things be very tough for people. So I would say don't give up through the process, and also just realize the risk involved. There's certainly a lot of risk, but there can be an unbelievable amount of reward. I think about the generational legacy that my dad has given our family by starting this company. He didn't know whether I would turn out to be a civil engineer, but there was an opportunity of a medium for generational legacy, which is so cool for me, and also for all of our employees. We've had employees who've been here for over 20 years. One of them, it's like just thinking through the opportunities to be able to give to employees and to the community is just remembering that at the end of the hardship is the advice I'd give to someone starting a company.
That's great. All right. So we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back and we're going to put Marc on the civil engineering hot seat to wrap things up. We're back with Marc Sandhu, president of ARS Engineers in Dallas, Texas. And now we're going to put Marc on the civil engineering hot seat. You ready, Marc?
I'm ready.
First question. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning routine or a lunchtime routine, something that you do consistently on a daily basis that has contributed to your success?
I'll tell you one I'm doing and one I'm striving to do better. The one I'm doing is, it's not necessarily just at lunchtime, but just getting outside the walls of this office when I'm in the office, or getting outside home when I'm working from home, and putting a little movement in and thinking through the things that I need to ponder and get back to, but making sure to be physically away from it just for 5 minutes is unbelievably helpful to my mental health. And I'm better for the rest of the day after that happens. It's nothing fancy. I don't have a particular mantra. I'm just walking and thinking. The thing I'm trying to do better is starting my day off with prayer and in the Bible. That happens maybe later in the day, usually for me, but I'm, jumping right into Outlook and what fire happened overnight and just starting my day that way. And I think it could be better if I kind of did the first thing a different way every day.
That's great. All right, next question. What is one book you might recommend to engineers, or just one book that you found to be extremely helpful in your personal and professional development? I know there's tons of books out there, but sometimes there's one that really sticks out for us.
It's funny you asked that. We were just talking about a helpful book yesterday, came up in conversation. So I was in the Texas Society of Professional Engineers PLE class last year, the Professional Engineers Leadership Institute, and we had to read a lot of books for that. And there was a lot of good ones, but the one that really stuck with me was 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. It is, there was a lot of really good information in all the other books, but let me ask you, Anthony, have you read that book before or heard about it?
No, I haven't read that book, but Lencioni has come up now in probably 3 of the last 5 episodes. So I think I'm going to be ordering that book very soon.
The book, this is a really good one. It's a fable is how it's described. It's a fictional account instead of just here's how to handle the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a story of a firm with new leadership that goes on an offsite retreat, and a lot of things go wrong and a lot of personnel dynamic stuff happens, and then there's kind of discussion of how to handle those things in a real situation. It makes it very entertaining, actually, and keeps your attention. So I would definitely recommend that one.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to check that one out. All right, so Marc, here's the next question. Thinking back on your managers of the past, and you don't have to name names specifically, but when you think of some of your favorite managers that you've had, what made them your favorite? What we're trying to understand here is, what are some of those kind of key traits and characteristics of successful managers in the world of civil engineering?
One thing, not being afraid to call me out when there's a mistake. So I'm thinking early career, just not being afraid to say, oh, that's nice that you spent an hour on the quantities for this particular portion of this roadway, but that's not how we do it. Like not being rude, but just being honest. That's very helpful. It's something I perhaps struggle with as a manager, on just being facts are facts. But being counseled as a young engineer, that was really helpful to hear from somebody else. So, and then also character trait of a good manager, being willing to stand up for your staff. If a client is calling a staff member out by name and may be out of line, or if something's happening internally in the company and you know that it's not deserved, just being willing to stand up for those people goes a long way with employees.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Having your team's back, right? That sounds like that's a really important thing as a manager. All right, Marc, I've got one final question for you. We call it the civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you were to get into an elevator with a civil engineering professional, now let's say it's earlier in their career, and you had about 30 to 40 seconds with him or her, what career advice would you give them in that short period of time?
I would say to a young engineer, whatever task your company is giving you, learn it and do it well. Do it very well. But be sure over your first few years to hone in on what areas of design you like, or what areas of analysis you like, so that you can kind of help guide and direct what you want the future of your career to look like. And if it's not culverts, but you spent 4 years designing culverts, that you would kind of know where you need to pivot to.
That's great. Awesome advice. All right. Well, Marc Sandhu, president of ARS Engineers, I want to thank you for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering Podcast. Thank you for talking to us about your father, his legacy, the firm, and just your career overall. We really do appreciate the time.
Thank you, Anthony. It was an honor.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Marc. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel here so you get those videos, and we can help you to become a well-rounded engineer. I'll see you next week.